Hello and welcome to a very special Jay Duke show on the Horse Network. And today we're having a roundtable, and it's really going to be a great discussion. The panel today that I've set up for you is 3 top experts from the industry, and I really can't wait to get to it. So thanks so much for all the work that Carly put in this week, Carly Sparks from the Horse Network, and thank you for Horse Network for making this all possible. I want to thank the Equivault.com for sponsoring this episode. The Equivault.com is the best source for your lessons at home. There are over 400 lessons online that you can get, all the way from novice to advanced. If you're preparing for a Grand Prix or equitation finals, or if you're just starting beginners off on horseback, it is the place to get all of your virtual lessons. Gives you a map of the arena, gives you dimensions, shows you where to put everything, gives you a supply list and a basic outline for your lessons. And it's a great training tool, especially in these days where travel is somewhat limited. So I want to quickly get to our topic today because there's really so much to discuss. And it's a little bit of a tricky one for me to talk about because there's a lot of elements to it. So last week I wrote an article on the hunter world. And first of all, I want to say I love the hunters. I think it's a beautiful thing to watch a hunter. I think it's a beautiful thing to ride a hunter. The horses are amazing, and it's really a great sport to be involved in. And so I wrote an article on it and received a lot of great comments and received a lot of not great comments, and that was all good. I appreciate every single one. The title of the article was describing whether hunters should be a sport or an exhibition. And, that was designed to get people's attention, and that definitely is what happened. To me, honestly, either way, it's a good thing. I think anything that is in the best interest of the horses and in the sport is a good thing. And the more people involved and the more good people involved and the more good things that are happening, that's great. But the basis of my article was about whether or not the judging system, which has been in place for a very long period of time, needs to have an update. And there are some sports that have been updated like this. A good example is, say, reining in the industry. Dressage has had some updates. The best example I can think of in the professional world of sports is figure skating, which 20 years ago went through a major overhaul in its judging techniques and saw very positive results. So I base the article on that, asking the question, should there be technical elements in hunter judging, or should it, right now it's a 100% subjective score with some, deductions which are automatic, but for the most part, it is all on subjectivity. And what I questioned was, should there be some elements in the sport that were an automatic deduction, such as, say, a late lead change or a light rub or things like that, in order to make the sport easier to watch for the average person, for the owners, for the young trainers, for the amateurs and juniors that are just learning the sport, not the top professionals that watch 100 hunters a day, but the ones that really don't know a lot about the sport. So it created a lot of discussion, and I think discussion is always positive. I think anything that, whenever you're discussing something, it's a good thing because everyone wants what's best for the hunters and what's best for the sport. So I think discussion is a positive thing, and that is in the best interest of the sport. And that ties into, the horses. And that's what it really comes down to. Horse welfare is such an important thing. That's why we all do this. We love horses, and we're all here for the horses, and they're such amazing animals. And so anything that can make things better for them, to me, is a good thing. I also feel that judging hunters is very difficult. I think it's a very hard job. I think, hunter judges, the hours they work, they're given, 4 cards to do at a time, sometimes even more. I don't know how they can possibly do that. And it's very difficult. And I would like to see, there's a lot of criticism of judging because people don't really understand it. And I don't think that's fair. And I'd like to find a way, and I'm hoping this forum will help with increasing the understanding of what it's like to be a hunter judge, because it is a very challenging thing. And I do believe that hunter judges should get even more respect than they already do. So in saying that, I'm going to bring on my 3 wonderful guests, and we're starting off with a top USEF judge. This is Geoff Case. He's a large R judge. He's coached some of the best horse shows in the United States of America, and he's also a top trainer. So thank you for Geoff for being on. We have Kathy Serio, who is a top amateur hunter rider. Currently, she's competing in Wellington, a very knowledgeable person on the sport of hunters. And we have Catie Staszac, who is a top commentator. She's done many international derbies, from Devon Derby, Frank Meadows Derby, and she's also a commentator for the FEI. So thank you all to coming on to the show. It's great to have you here, and we're going to get right to it. Let's start off with Kathy, and my question is going to be for all three of you here, but we'll start with Kathy. And it is, does the hunter judging system need an update? You know, that it's been around in its present form for, I don't know, 60 years. There's been some updates to it. It's not exactly the same as it was 60 years ago, but it's generally the same as it was at that point in time, I believe. And, you know, my question for everyone is, does it need an update, or maybe it's just fine the way that it is? Kathy, what is your opinion on that?
I've been a rider for 51 years. I'll be 56 this year. And competing at the top level of the amateur divisions for the last probably 20 years. And, you know, change is really hard. And we all know this. And the one thing that hasn't changed is the way that the hunters are judged. Everything else has changed. The horse that we ride has changed. The courses have changed from outside courses to in a ring. The footing has changed. It's big business. It's a big horse show management. It's a big expense. It's a profitable business for horse show managers now. It's not, oh, everybody come to the ring and set up a tailgate. So everything has evolved except the one element of judging. So I do think, although change is difficult, and judging is very hard. I've never said judging is not hard. I don't think it's fair to put a judge in a position to have 6 cards open and expect that to go well. Surely someone's going to get lost. Someone's feelings are going to get hurt. And they may be trying to do their best job, but that is completely unrealistic to expect a judge to be able to follow 6 different classes throughout the day. Also, with that being said, we have so many divisions. We have just too many divisions. When you have 110 horses in a performance 3-3 class, why are we not doing 30, pin 30, do 30, pin 30? But the fact that we have to keep the card open the whole day, and then you get 0.15, 0.16, 0.17. There are so many things we need to change about this sport. So yeah, I'm all for that.
Great. Geoff, so you do this on a regular basis and big shows, and you've probably had 6 cards thrown at you and such. What are your thoughts on what Kathy said?
Well, I mean, I think most systems, regardless of sport, nothing is perfect. What we do have works. I think what we could do better as a judging community and as a horse show community is explain the judging system, the scoring system a little better to the exhibitors. In addition to judging, I also train. So I have kids, I have parents, I have amateurs, and, they have a lot of questions. Why, when I think the round was the same today, is it an 82 and tomorrow it's an 85? I think the scoring system, for the most part, does a very good job of putting the horses in the right order. And that, I think, is what's essential to the scoring system. And I think something that gets lost. People get so focused on the number, but the number is just a tool to put the horses in the order you think you should be in as a judge. And a lot of the actual number score has quite a lot to do with your first 1 or 2 horses in the ring, because that's how you're going to set up your scoring system. That's how you're going to set up your card. We all go into various shows with certain expectations of a level of horse we're going to see, a level of rider. I go into WEF or indoors with a very different expectation than I do if I'm judging a small regional show somewhere. So you try to get that first score as right as possible. But there are days where you might expect brilliance and you don't get it. There are days where you might expect mediocrity and a few people come and surprise you. But again, I think exhibitors and I think parents, I think everybody gets a little too focused on the actual number and not the placings in the end. And I think that's something that people maybe don't realize, or it's not talked about enough. That an 82 today may not be an 82 tomorrow, because you're talking about a different level of competition, a different level of rider, a different level of horse. And essentially, we talked about this a little bit earlier, Jay. My hope as a judge is that most people leave the horse show feeling good about themselves. So if I'm judging the first years at WEF, my 85 is going to be different than the short stirrup classic at another horse show. I don't want the winner to go home with a 72 and feel bad about themselves because they got a 72, because that score is relative to the company that they're in, not necessarily as a hard standard, if that makes sense.
It does. And I do find that interesting. And I get that. I think in 2021, we have to be aware of people's feelings, of course. You know, I don't know if that, from a functional point of view, as standard, I think makes more sense. But we do want to, of course, these people are spending a lot of money. They're spending a lot of the time, and it's so emotional for them. And so you're right. We do want them to leave happy. Catie, what do you think? Do you think that the hunter judging system needs an update, or do you think it works just fine?
I feel like I'm fortunate to have a unique perspective in that I have experienced this as a rider and also as someone that's trying to promote the sport to the masses and bring in new fans. And I think a lot of what Geoff said is very true. I think a big part of it is education and understanding and getting people to really learn a bit more of what goes into the judging. I think through the International Hunter Derby program, we've seen the sport get a little bit more exciting, and there are some more tangible numbers and technical scores, you know, 1 to 10 for your handy score and receiving extra points for high options so people can better understand that. I think there could maybe be some more transparency in the judges booth to help people better understand. I do think there's a good base system. There's a lot of tradition in our sport, and it is a subjective sport at its heart, a little bit of an art as well. And I think for sure it could evolve, but I think the foundation is there. It's about maybe being more transparent and educating people for sure.
So when I wrote that article last week and put it up on social media, of course, to create the discussion, and there were some comments, I believe there's somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 comments amongst the different sites. So it really had a reaction. And one of, you know, what I heard a lot was from people who were not thrilled with the article was saying to me is, well, you should go get your judge's card. You should sit in the booth and you should do that. And other, you know, people that don't understand judging should all just be a judge, essentially. Well, that's not realistic, obviously. That's not going to happen. We're not going to have, you know, 5,000 or 10,000, you know, riders out there go and say, you know, go take judges clinics. Not to say they shouldn't take them. I understand that. But from a practical point of view, that's just not going to happen. So, Catie, what do you think would be an idea to help with that education and that transparency that you mentioned?
So I actually tried to sign up for the judges clinic that was in Wellington last year. I really was close to going out and trying to pursue getting a judge's card because I love it and I find it really fascinating and I wanted to learn. I couldn't get in, it was full. So there's definitely interest there, especially in Wellington, and that's really great. I would love to see maybe a bit more of a program or a pipeline to help maybe get some younger people to get into judging and maybe make some of those evolutions in the perspectives that are judging horses in the ring. It is very much, you know, the majority of an older demographic and the traditional, you know, that people have seen. But as things evolve, viewpoints evolve, and it is very much, you know, the judge's opinion. I'd love to see maybe some more opportunities for, you know, younger people to begin a judge's career and build that up. I'd love to see more of that. Maybe if there's a way, you know, to make judges' cards more accessible and transparent. You know, as a rider, it can be hard when you feel like you've come out of the ring and put forth your best round and the results don't reflect that and you want to come away from the show happy. So is there a way for maybe to make judges' cards more accessible so you can at least get that judge's feedback and understand why you had that result, and then you can go back and improve upon that? I think those are two small things that, you know, could maybe, you know, help evolve how, you know, judges are perceived and all of that. I love the mainstream sport comparison to things like figure skating. Gymnastics is also a subjective sport. And I just think about, you know, yesterday was the Super Bowl. Do you watch the Super Bowl for the game or just kind of the commercials and the halftime show? Or do you really get into the game? You don't really get into the game unless you understand it. You know, do you know what intentional grounding is? Do you know how the points work? It's the same with any sport. If you don't understand what's happening, it's hard to really become a fan of it or get into it. And I talk about this a lot with show jumping. and FEI, I'd love to see more data in the sport, because I think the more people know and can find something that can help them, predict a winner or know what's happening, the more engaged they can be and want to continue to follow along with that sport and become a fan.
I would say there's no question that the show jumping in general, but specifically, even more so the hunter industry, is not set up to bring in new fans and set up as an audience event. I think there's no question about that. Kathy, what do you think about that question as far as, any thoughts with the judging, like Katie was talking about?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, because actually I'm not just an amateur rider. I'm also in a career in the animal health industry. So as the person that was the main Adequan person for 18 years, and now I work for a feed company, we are sponsors for this sport. And I did a lot of statistics, and 24 to 28% of the prize money is paid out to hunters. 70% is paid to jumpers. Most sponsors do not want to sponsor hunters. They want to sponsor jumpers. They can get their head around it. They don't understand the scoring system whatsoever. I've fought up and down to get us to sponsor the hunter division because nobody wanted to do it. But when you have statistics like that, where, I can't even break even at a horse show if I win every single class. And that's just wrong. Back in the day, you could win $600 in one class. It's big money now, and it's big sport. And who's paying this bill? Amateurs. By and large, we are paying for our professionals to show our horses. We are paying the entries. So at the end of the day, we need to have a better payout system so the top tier classes get more money. Obviously, we pay more entry fee. We should be getting more prize money. That goes with just trying to be transparent about the judging. I completely agree. We need to post cards. I recently asked to see the judge's card, and it was very eye-opening, I guess you could say.
Share that story, because you told me this story, and just if you could just go into it for a moment to describe to people because people always say you can always go and ask for the card for the judge. So what happened?
Well, I did. I went to the steward, and it took 4 hours. So I waited all day, and I met with the judge, and immediately the judge told me the wrong class. So then I said, no, it's the second class. And what the judge said was completely incorrect. Like that, I got an 80.5, and I don't want to make this a personal discussion. I really don't. Right. But if a horse is, quote, dumped its front end, it never would have had an 80.5. It would have had a 65. So how's that even the accurate analogy for what happened?
Look at the card or just speak with the judge?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And it lasted for about 10 seconds, and that was it. And off I went. Okay. But when you have a couple different trainers that are also judges at the in-gate, kind of pushing you to go talk to the steward, to talk to the judge, what happened? I think I might have made my point a little bit. Like, if you think my horse dumped his front end, why did I get an 80.5? That's not an 80.5. That's lower than that. But I do remember Tommy told me something once a while ago, that when he first got into the sport, before he went to work for Mr. Wheeler in Sismont Manor, Gene Cunningham, who's like the founder of this sport, said to him, son, if you got your card, you'd win a lot more. And he swore he'd never get his card just to show him the wrong, he'll win anyway. But that's the common denominator. People feel like that.
Geoff, how often do people come to you? How often do exhibitors come to you and ask you to discuss a round that they had that day? Does that happen on a daily basis, or when does that happen?
Well, through official channels, no one has ever asked me to see my card. Nobody has ever asked me to discuss a round.
I've never done it before either.
I kind of take it as I must be doing a pretty good job. But, we all have friends in the industry. 1 week I'm a judge, the next week I'm an exhibitor. 1 week I'm in the booth, the next week I'm in the warm-up ring. People, I wouldn't say all that often, but they'll ask questions, and I'm always happy to answer them. I'm always happy to explain myself, because there is always a reason for the number. We may not 100% of people may agree for the reason for the number, but I'm not just throwing it out there. There is a reason behind the score. And, Kathy's right. There is a vehicle right now. It's not the most accessible, but if you do want to discuss your round with a judge, you have every right to. You have to go through the steward, and possibly if there's a break during the day, you can discuss it with a judge, but typically it'll be at the end of the show day. Which I think there's a little bit, in my mind, a little bit more onus on the exhibitor. If they really, really do have questions, there is a system there for them. A lot of them choose not to use it because by the time we're done judging, it's 6, 7 o'clock at night. They'd rather be at dinner, and they don't show up.
Yeah.
And the judges that I have sat with have all been very forthcoming with their opinions and reasons behind it, and are happy to answer questions. The problem comes, and we had some incidents in Wellington last year when the exhibitors, march up to the booth and make it an aggressive moment. I don't think that's ever necessary. I think you can always ask if you're polite and you're friendly. Every judge I know is happy to discuss your round with you. I have friends that, little children come and ask, and they sit for an hour and a half after the horse show at a picnic table and give them things to work on at home to improve their scores. I think as a judging community, I think that there's this reputation that we're hiding behind a curtain, tweedling our mustaches, trying to give you bad scores and looking for problems. That was the most eye-opening thing for me when I first sat in the booth as a mentee, is that it's actually quite the opposite. You're coming down the last line and you've had a good round, and we're like, yes, please let us give a 90. Please let us give a 90. We want to give high scores. We want brilliance. We want to reward. I would rather reward brilliance than criticize, little technical problems. And I think that's a little bit, when you talk about the technical scoring system, if let's say, for example, I'm judging the high performance, and a horse canters on a jump, backs up, jumps over the wing, lands, and in a playful way shakes its head. Me as a judge, I'm like 95. Like, it knew it did a good job. It was happy. Other judges would be like, oh, it's too fresh, 72. That's a little bit of an opinion thing. And again, like we discussed earlier, when you're talking about the technical aspects of reining, dressage, figure skating, gymnastics, they all have, especially in reining and dressage, they have set patterns that they basically work on all year. If you jump the same hunter course every time you went in the ring for a year, you'd be bored out of your mind. So that would be one of the challenges in analogizing our sport to those.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I want to stay with you for a moment here and back to the card accessibility. So apparently at one time, and I think I recall this, but I'm not sure, is they used to post the cards in the show office. And I do believe I remember that. And I think we're going back to the 70s. At this
Little
point.
kid, yep. Mm-hmm.
So it did used to get done, but there's problems with doing that. So what I recommended is, in my article, was post the cards online. But Geoff, if you could, as a judge, say, easier said than done, there's issues with just posting the cards online. And if you could just, for our viewers, explain as a judge a couple of those problems with because people are like, yeah, let's see the cards, but that's not so simple to do.
Well, I wasn't in the room when the rule was made. I don't know the logic of the rule, but you have every right to see and discuss your round. You're not allowed to see and discuss competitors' rounds. So that would be the challenge from a logistical standpoint of posting them online. I mean, I guess, Wellington, for example, I think WEC, several horse shows now have gone to online accounts. And maybe there's a way, although it would probably be very labor intensive for the secretaries who are already overworked, to access just your line in the judge's card. The problem is, if you don't have the judge standing there translating it to you, as a lay person, you might not understand it, because as a judge, it's my job to watch. I have to write, but it's my job to watch. So the symbols I make on my card, the shorthand on my card, is literally as quick as I can get my eyes down and back up. Because so often, the worst thing as a judge is if you're looking down and you miss something, because everybody else at the ring saw it. Mm-hmm. You have to mark your card at some point. You missed it, and then you're getting lambasted because maybe the horse fell off the lead for 2 strides, but it jumped out of line. It did the lead change. It started the corner. You're like, okay, this is a good time to mark my card at the last line. Look up, and it's still on the lead. So again, like it's almost like hieroglyphics. Like if I showed you a line on a judge's card, it might not make a lot of sense to you. And each judge, to some extent, has their own symbol format. We don't have time to write a sentence for every jump. We don't have time to write a paragraph between rounds. It's symbols that mean something to us, so that when we're looking back, like Kathy said, when the 95th horse in the 3-3 performance is in the ring and we're comparing it to the horse that went second, you have to have something to look at, because none of us, maybe some of us have eidetic memories, but I don't.
You should be in that
and
position
you have to
do it. It's just
Yeah, I mean, you have to have some notation to be able to compare it against. And again, we don't have time to sort of write that out for the layperson because the next horse is coming in the ring before the last horse even left.
Okay, yeah, no, you make great points, and I do think there's some things here which we need to try to get solutions for, but it's not the simplest to get those solutions. Catie, I want to go to you. So the other day, my daughter, who's 17, has competed in the hunters for years, loves show jumping. She's, lives horses and show jumping. She was watching the Hunt and Go Derby from Wellington, Florida on the Grand Prix field. And, she just loves the derbies and watching it, which a lot of people do. And, one of my old horses was in it, the Mindful horse. So I asked, I wanted her to keep an eye on him and see how everything was going. And she was looking at the scores and she goes, I said, well, how are they scoring this? And she goes, I don't really understand the scoring. Now, this is a kid who lives horses, she goes to 25 horse shows a year and is very knowledgeable about the sport and didn't understand. And I'm not saying how the judges were placing the horses. How the actual scores, like how they came up with a score of 358, like not in comparison to other horses, just how do you get 358? Like, how are they being scored? And this class did not have a professional commentator like yourself. So there wasn't someone to explain it. And there wasn't any way to look it up. I guess maybe you could look it up in the USEF rule book if you wanted to while you're watching the class. But point is, here's a viewer, loves the sport and not getting any information and understanding on what's happening. So what do you have to say to that gap that we have between the people that love the sport and then the actual sport itself?
Sure. And I think the Hunt and Go format is another effort to try to make the classes more interesting to the general person to watch. The derbies can run, especially when there are that many entries in a class, they can run for hours and hours. And to get someone interested in the sport to sit and watch the entire class for that long, it's just hard. Nobody has that kind of time or even attention span anymore when they're online. So I think that's another effort to try to evolve and make it more user friendly. For me, obviously a commentator helps. We can explain things and educate, and that's always what I'm trying to do when I'm on air. Graphics are another thing, that's easy to implement. That can kind of, just kind of break down the scoring. Even when I'm commentating, sometimes if I don't have graphics and I'm trying to hear the scores and get them, from headset, I'm frantically trying to write down what the score is and to keep tabs on what's happening. And it can be a lot to keep track of, especially across different formats, how the scoring is. You can always look things up in the prize list. But, you have to kind of dig sometimes to find the information. So that could definitely be accessible, even recaps and stories to explain the format, even if it's in a sub-footer or something that we can just help educate on how the classes are being run and not just the results, I think can be helpful. Again, it's continuing to educate, and as those formats change, really explaining what they are. Even in dressage, a couple of things, they have a scribe. So they're kind of writing down things, and that could be helpful for judges. So they have their short form and maybe they don't have time to look down, but if they have a scribe and someone that's writing notes for them, that can help with looking back and maybe a transparency thing. Dressage also uses the SAP app, which is data, and it's a fan judging app where people can log on and they can kind of predict the score, and it helps them feel more involved. And that also is an educational tool where they know how the scoring works, and they're given directions and they try to replicate that in the judges. And again, it just reinforces having a personal involvement and connection where you want to continue to follow along and see what happens. And you become more of a fan of the sport the more you get it, the closer your scores are to that of the judges and the results. And are you, judging as, that judge were? And I think that's been really great for the sport of dressage. And I would love to see something adapted to that for the sport and the hunters and even equitation here in America.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that, getting that audience involvement like that. So Kathy, you had mentioned earlier about sponsors and that. So would you say that the hunter world, and this would include the USHJA, this would include the horse show managers, this would include the trainers that are involved with it, Do they feel that, hey, we don't need to do any of that. We don't need to make any of those efforts to bring in new people to the sport. We're making our money. We're doing well. And, we're just happy with the way it is. So, we don't need to bring in anybody and make this accessible to the outside. Is that a fair statement?
Maybe. I think it's up to us to demand that because it's time to put a little more money back into the hunters. I know the international derbies, that was part of it, but that's to me a standalone. It's not, you won't always see a green confirmation hunter do the international derby. It's a different horse. You don't often have the division horse doing the international derbies. So, it's a great class. It's a great thing that's happened for the hunters. We've had those. They were called classics. We did those years ago, 70s, 80s, outside courses, hogs backs. So this isn't anything new. It's been reinvented a little differently where I feel like it's almost taken on a little bit of a jumper tone in some places. But I still think that the whole conversation here should be turned back to solutions. I think that there are so many ways we can address this and try to fix this. And you can even start with one show as a test market. What you talked about, Catie, we absolutely need scribes. We need to do a volunteer program. We need to have every person needs to volunteer 1 week of maybe every other year, volunteer judging. Trainers that don't have their card can sit and they can judge just like the other judges. So that doesn't put the person that doesn't have their card at a disadvantage the following week. Those judges' scores will count. We have our own rules that say that you have to have 2 judges in a AA rated division. It's rule number GR1009. There was 1 judge last weekend in the amateurs. How is that allowed? We need 2 judges for AA rated divisions. It just seems like things are just slipping and people are allowing it to slip. And they say, oh, better luck next week. Come back next. And I feel like it's time to say, no, let's fix this now. Next week was yesterday. And we keep having that mentality. We're not going to change it. Nothing can be changed. Nothing can be fixed. I think volunteers, it could be like jury duty. You have to do jury duty and you have to give back to the sport. And that's the way we can do it. You're not going to have a horse show of volunteers, but you're going to have a horse show with volunteers.
And who does, when you say things like, okay, so there was just 1 judge there, even though that was against the rules, who do you feel that falls on? Does that fall on the horse show manager? Does that fall on the exhibitor? Does that fall on USHJ or USEF? Who needs to take responsibility?
I'm not sure. Whenever Mary Babick is tagged on any post that I have about the judging controversies, she'll say, oh, we're adding that to the sports integrity task force. And then you hear nothing again. So this isn't new, but we need solutions, not just gripes. And I'm all for any test market to start a solution type of a horse show. Do it online. Everything is online today. So you have a scribe, they input what you want. You never take your eyes off the ring, ever. If you ever see a dressage test, they do not take their eyes off the ring. They do not look at their cell phones. They devote, it cost me $405 for 90 seconds in the ring. That doesn't include the price of my horse. You add a $150,000 horse to the mix, it cost me now $23,000 for 90 seconds. That's a lot of money. We deserve full attention, So if it's not working with 1 judge, then we need 2 or 3 and make them all be jury duty type judges where they have to give back. We can't make this sport any more expensive. It's already crazy expensive.
It is crazy expensive. I think that, again, comes back to how much is asked of the judges, in a day. The days are so long. The number of rounds are so many, again, these are professionals and experts, and they're trying. Of course, they want. I've been in the judges' booth lots as a course designer. I do know, and they, like what Geoff said earlier. Yes, they are really cheering for people, and they're great people. They want to see what's best for the sport.
I do think that they should stop preloading people into the ring until the judge is done. We should not be able to go in the ring until you guys have really finished off that last person. Perhaps they don't do back-to-back rounds anymore. That's also caused issues where they get lost, but the open cards, double classes, it's so much for a judge to keep track of. And if you're bad at bookkeeping, but you're a good judge, you're not a good judge because you failed the bookkeeping end of it. Not everybody can do both. And we're the only sport that once you get your card, no one evaluates you. NFL referees are evaluated every single year. Umpires are evaluated. They only have to buy the package at WEF and watch a class and evaluate a judge. It doesn't take much, $700.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So Geoff, let's go back to you. I have a question for you with the judging. And, you mentioned this earlier today about the difficulty of assigning a technical score to a portion, like a light rub. What is a light rub is, to one person is a hard rub to another. And so, or a late change or a swap. Swaps drive me crazy because in the hunt field, a swap is not a big deal. At the Olympics, a swap is not a big deal, but in the hunters, it's the end of the end of the world. But that's fine as long as there's consistency to it. In order to create that transparency and that consistency, do you think it's a matter of assigning a technical score, or is it a matter of having more, better training and more consistency for the judges, and then maybe having a system like Kathy is talking about of accountability down the road? Which of those two, or maybe neither, is more plausible?
I think there's benefits to all of it. The one main point I will agree with Kathy on is the best judged classes are with two judges. Opinions are a great thing. Discussion is a great thing. I hesitate to get all in with the technical scoring system because, as we discussed a little this afternoon, if every course is the same, every judge is judging the same, you're likely to have the same horse winning all the time. Like I think maybe I'm wrong, but is it Stephen Peters that has won something like 14 CDI 5-stars in a row?
It's like 15 or 16 at this point.
I mean, while that's a cool story, like, how'd you like to be the person that's second every time?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to lose your enthusiasm to show. And, judges bring their life experience with them to the booth, from their childhood to their current training system to where they've been. Some judges have certain peccadillos that others don't mind. You bring up the swap. Yes, for certain judges, the swap is a game changer. My personal opinion, if the horse doesn't particularly shift hard, okay, you're not going to get a 90 with a swap, but it doesn't mean you're in the 60s. Certain judges hate the cross canter. But as you mentioned briefly, Jay, I think we have to, as an industry, get back to the point of the sport, which originated with fox hunting, field hunting. So you're right. So for me, certain judges will kill a cross canter. They'll make that worse than a miss. For me, if you miss to a big stone wall in the hunt field, you could die. You cross canter the stone wall, you're probably going to get over it.
Change the courses. Let's change the courses.
I feel like we've lost that lens a little bit of the traditions and the basis of our sport and why we're here. And I think we've gotten a little critical over things that are easy to see, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Some of us have gotten a little bit into the business of deducting instead of rewarding, which I touched on earlier. And again, like if it's an amazing horse, like a horse of their time, like Catch Me Now, Oscar with Rick Fancher, Justified, Rockstein, talking about the best of the best of the best in the sport. And that's a unique animal, but with a different opinion, somebody else could win, and I think that's good for the sport. I think that brings exhibitors back. I think that keeps people horse showing, because in some sense, under our current system, you always have a chance, whether you feel like it or not, you always have a chance to win.
And an interesting thought there with what you're saying, if the level of difficulty was increased, whether through, say, higher jumps, like the hunters now, and I said this in my article, at one time the hunters jumped 4'6", 1.37 meters in the regular hunters, and today in the high performance, then the height is now 4 foot. And you still in the big international derbies, you'll get some big jumps, no question about it. But for the most part, the heights have lowered. And the courses have gotten easier. I grew up riding, and I don't want to be one of those guys, well, we used to do it this way, so it was better. But I mean, we jumped stone walls and dry ditches and Liverpools. That was in the pony hunters. So, I mean, it was harder, but maybe it was a lot easier to judge too, because there was a lot bigger mistakes. Like we were just trying to stay on. So it didn't come down to the nitty gritty and the little things, and getting so picky. So that is interesting that you say that point, and I completely agree with it. That's really, really well said. Thank you for sharing that, because it's not, as I said earlier, it's not an easy fix. That's for sure. Kathy, I want to talk about transparency, and I really think this is a big one. for multiple reasons. It's a big one for the judges because, again, judges, I think, are unfairly criticized because people don't understand what they're doing. It's a really big one for education of the young riders, of the young professionals, of the parents, of the owners. And education's a really big one for the horses. You know, we need to, horsemanship is an issue in the industry in general. There's some great horsemen and there's some not great horsemen. And so I believe the more education that we have helps that. And education can mean so many things. But in this specific case, we're talking about education of how a hunter is judged. So what is your thought on how important transparency of what, you know, people like Mr. Case are doing in the judges booth to get that out to the 16-year-old kid who just rode their, you know, 3'3" junior hunter?
I agree with you, Jay. Back in the day, we saw the judges card all the time, and it made you a better rider, made you want to come back and fix what you messed up. I mean, I think we all know what we did wrong. It's when we did something right and didn't get rewarded for it, I think, is where we have a problem. And you see that from time to time. So transparency, I think, might take some of that away and help alleviate some of that skepticism that's out there, I guess you could call it. But it's now big business. And when you add an artistic impression type of a bit of an industry that's beautiful, and then you add big money to it, sometimes things get misconstrued. I think it's important. I've talked to a lot of amateur riders this year, last year, the year before. This is a circuit of 12 weeks. It should be considered a horse show. And I do not believe any judge that shows here should judge here. There are so many intertwined horse deals going on. And I just think it looks bad outside looking in. I know people will say, oh, they can put all that aside. I've witnessed it. I've witnessed judges telling me that another judge said, I'm going to make that horse win because I just sold it. And things like that. You know, this sport needs to get a little bit more honest at times about what's happening. And you do see that from time to time. It's so disappointing because it's so expensive. And I just really feel like we need to fix some of those issues. And transparency certainly will do it.
Well, I'm going to go to Catie in a sec, but I first of all, 100%, I agree with you on, you know, I mean, truly judges should only judge and shouldn't be a part of it, but that's not really the real world either. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. That's just not the way economics are and the industry is. And of course, we all wish that could be. I mean, honestly, it should be the judges. It's a full-time profession and they all make, you know, $200,000 a year and being paid by USCF. That would be ideal, but that's not going to happen. So Catie, if you could reply to what are your thoughts on what Kathy said just there? What do you think on that?
Well, I think actually what Geoff said earlier about judges really actually there's a good rapport. And when I've interviewed judges, I love talking to them. They're really open and I always gain a lot of insight. I think it's fascinating, maybe beyond just perhaps if we could, you know, increase transparency, you know, with things like judges' cards, but can we increase accessibility to the judges? Because sometimes as a rider, you might feel, yes, there is a system to be able to ask for the card or to speak to the judge, but it's not always easy. You know, the judges obviously have a lot on their plate, but if you could be able to talk to the judges more, if the judges could speak to you more and talk about the process or what goes into it for them, a lot of times you feel like the judges are kind of these faraway people that are not accessible. You know, you might be afraid to go to the judge and ask for that judge's thoughts or opinions on you. And if it were a little bit easier to access the judges, maybe that would be helpful. Also, I think with what Kathy said about just the expenses of the sport, it is becoming more and more expensive. And when money's involved, I think it can harbor some of those feelings. That's a completely different issue. But at the end of the day, regardless of what your score is or what the judges think of you, you have to be, you know, sometimes come out of the ring and just be happy with, I put in a good ride and I had a really positive experience with my horse and my horse had a good day and we learned and we're getting better. That's what it's all about. I know there's judging, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. But obviously when you're spending that much money, you know, there does become, you know, other issues, but that is a completely separate issue that would require many roundtables to go over. But I think that also too has to be a mindset of a rider that you have to remind yourself.
And, with what you're saying there, it's the riders coming out of the ring with that mindset. You do see that with the riders, with the top coaches, that is there. It's the riders that don't have the top coaches, which is a lot. Not everyone can have a top coach for many reasons. And so it's those riders that are uneducated that we need to find a way to help them so much. Again, we're not here to help the top 1% type of thing. That they're okay already. So that is key. So Catie, I'm going to ask this question to the whole panel. We'll start with Catie. Where do you think the hunters are going as an industry from here? So here we are in 2021. Honestly, the numbers have gone down. The numbers, the prices have gone up, the numbers have gone down, interest has gone down. I think watching the derbies, even in the past, 10 years, the level of difficulty is going down. All of that is going that way. And that's okay. That's fine if that's the way we want to go. My old coach, Richard Keller, who passed away last year, said at one time, we're going to have subterranean hunters one day. They're going to dig a hole and throw a pole in it. And that was a great quote. So what do you think? Where are they going, and where should they go, and as an industry for everyone's best interest?
Well, I think if you look at the international derby that we just had at LEF, the Hunt and Go, there were 60 some odd entries that lined up to jump that derby, and that's a lot of horses jumping an international derby. Obviously we get a very unique perspective here at LEF, seeing the very top and the biggest numbers and the best riders, and it's not representative of the entire nation and the entire sport. I do think that the International Hunter Derby program and the National Hunter Derby program, they do help invigorate interest in the hunters, and it's been really good for the sport. But I think with everything, there's more to evolve and improve upon. There is a good system, but we can definitely improve upon it. And I would love to see more judges coming up the pipeline, and I'd love to see more access to the judges and scoring so we can help better educate the public and bring more fans to the sport, because that's ultimately what we want across disciplines and divisions. We want to have more people involved in the sport so it can grow and stay healthy and remain like it has. What we get to see in Wellington every day maybe happen in more parts around the country.
Geoff, what are your thoughts? Where is the industry going, and where would you like to see it go?
Well, I think I don't have the statistics, but I think I will disagree with you on hunter numbers in general being down.
Okay.
Hunter numbers are diluted because where there used to be 500 divisions, there's 500 now. I think as a sport, whether you're talking about the hunters or the jumpers, and I think largely because of the financial component of it, it's become less of a professional-based sport and more of an amateur-based sport. Yeah. So, yeah, courses are a little diluted with the idea of keeping the amateurs safe, with the idea of keeping the juniors safe. You don't see very many in the high-performance hunters anymore. The first-year numbers are a little bit down. But the 2'3", the 2'6", the 2'9", all those divisions are huge. The 3-foot adult hunters, you have an A section and a B section here. So it looks like there's only 25, but there's two sections. There's actually 50 adult hunters here. I don't know that the numbers are going down. I think they're just getting more spread out. And the level, like you said about Richard, the level has been a little diluted with the idea of bringing more people into the sport and giving people more of a chance to participate. I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's where we're headed at the top sport too. You were talking about your guest last week, Lily and Adrian Sternlick, and a lot of the fantastic young American riders are all, for the most part, fortunate enough to be able to self-fund at that level of the sport. Owners for professionals are not what it used to be. It's hard as a working professional to have a top derby horse, to have a proper FEI Grand Prix horse, because A, they cost a lot of money to buy. B, if you're producing it from a young horse, somebody's going to come down the road and offer you so much money, you have to sell it. So again, I just think we're in general in every ring at the horse show becoming, and will continue to be unless something changes, a very amateur-based sport with a few fortunate professionals. But I think that's where the hunters are going. I think that's where the jumpers are going. From every level. I mean, again, with the jumpers, when I was a kid, you had low preliminary, high preliminary, intermediate, Grand Prix. You went from the children's jumpers to the high junior jumpers. There weren't all these choices in all these divisions, which is a good thing. but it does dilute the top of the sport a little bit, in my opinion. And I don't see that changing.
No, I don't see that changing either. And I do, the more people in the sport, the better for everybody. So I think it is great that there are those levels. I think we can all agree we don't need to have that many. I think one time I wrote up at the 3-6 hunter level, there were 11 different divisions during the week that people could jump 3-6 hunter. So I don't know that we need 11 different divisions to jump one height, but definitely bringing in, having the 2-6 and the 2-3 and the 2-foot and all that it's brought more people into the sport, and that's just good for everybody. Kathy, what are your thoughts? Where is this going?
I agree with Geoff a lot and what he said, and it is diluted, but the numbers are not, I don't think, going down. But I feel like I wish the amateurs would grow in the upper division as well. We keep battering a lower. I would love to do a 3-9 amateur division, and it's never gone that direction. With that being said, I also feel like, our whole dynamics and demographics have changed. It's women with children with careers. Back in the day, it was women with children, probably not as many had careers, so they had more time in the saddle. So you do get a lot more people down at the lower levels. But with that being said, I feel like some of the 3-3 divisions should not be amateur owner. I think they should be adult divisions. They should be able to lease a horse that they can actually then compete at that level, because they're trying to step up and sometimes their horse isn't ready. So let them lease them. So I don't know why that became an AO division 3-3, but that's something different altogether. And also what Geoff said about the professionals, it is so expensive that a professional typically can't bring a horse on the road. It's just, you can't afford to do it. So we go to Europe, and then we buy horses in Europe. And if we had a system where the pros can develop young horses, maybe get one free stall per barn or something, we could develop it a little bit more in this country. I kind of feel like the hunters are at a crossroads. We need to pull in more sponsorship dollars, more exhibitors, more spectators. I think it would be really great to do a score along like Catie suggested. The fastest growing discipline right now is dressage. Who'd have thunk that 10 years ago? But they're doing something right. And I think part of it is judging. People can understand it. It's transparent. It's immediate. And I think people want that and are looking to that to the future.
That's well said. I want to thank all three of you for being on the show. What a great panel. You all brought so much to it, such professionalism and such knowledge. And I'm really honored. Passion, absolutely. I'm really honored that you came on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Catie, Kathy, and Geoff, thanks so much. And we'll definitely, let's continue the discussion. Let's make this better for everybody involved, every rider, every horse out there. Let's make it just the best event that we possibly can. And that's what we're looking forward to. Next week, I want you to join me. Special guest Danny Waldman is coming on the show and talk about a colorful character. Danny is everything you want to see. She's going to have some great stories for us. And she's just a great woman and has so many super causes that she's working on. So join us for Danny Waldman next Monday on the Jay Duke Show. And thank you to the equivault.com. It is your best source for online lessons. So check them out. As always, Carly Sparks doing everything. Like I said, this week was really tough to put together. Really appreciate everything she did. And thank you to Horse Network for making all this possible and for making our sport better. As always, ride safely and respect the horse. Have a good day, everyone.